just when you thought, we were, completely full of shift, we are now going over to Newsmax, the network that is completely full of Schmidt. And there's been a ton of, like, pro-Kremlin talking points that have come out of Newsmax and OAN specifically, and of course Tucker Carlson over the last little bit. I mean, basically, like, right out of the Putin playbook. And if you haven't seen today, the story about the Kremlin papers that have just come out that leaked, I am, okay, let me bring this up real quick, if I may. It's from The Guardian. And in The Guardian, there's, let's see if I'll bring up the actual Guardian documents, because they actually have the pages themselves. But there's been a back and forth about this stuff, that somehow, here it is. This out. So Kremlin papers appear to show Putin's plot to put Trump in the White House. Let me bring this up a little bit. And get out of here, quit it. There we go. So this, I saw this morning's fascinating stuff. And that's right, Donna Bishop, you can't leak a lie. Like, there's been a couple of, like, Malcolm Nance and others who've come out and said it's not like the Kremlin to leak things. This looks like a disinfo campaign that they can snatch back later, blah, blah, blah. But that also operates on the idea that the Kremlin today is the Kremlin of yesterday, the Kremlin of 10 weeks ago, the Kremlin of Trump, or even 10 years ago, and it is increasingly not. And so you're going to see, like you see with the CCP sometimes, gaps and stuff is going to finally break through, right? In China, it shows up in what netizens do, and in Russia, it's going to be a little more like straight up spycraft. So this is a document that came out today. Exclusive documents suggest Russia launched secret multi-agency effort to interfere in the U.S. democracy. Now, I made the case a long time ago when Trump was like, they don't want Trump. They don't want me president. It's like, no, they're not supporting you as president. They don't think it'll be good for the country or you're even good for them. They want a bull in America's China shop. That's what they wanted. So Vladimir Putin personally authorized a secret spy agency operation to support a mentally unstable Donald Trump in 2016 U.S. presidential election, according to a closed session of Russia's National Security Council, according to what are assessed to be leaked Kremlin documents. And this is what are assessed to be. They're hedging on whether or not they're real. You have to. Because the Kremlin itself is so untrustworthy, nobody wants to step on that rake. So it's going to, when it comes to U.S. documents, it's going to be leaked American documents, blah, 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 even if they're faked. If they turn out to be faked later, everybody forgets the story. But in the case of Russia, everybody's like, oh, any of this could be bullshit. The key meeting took place on the 22nd of January 2016, the paper suggests, with the Russian president, his spy chiefs, and senior ministers all present. They agreed a Trump White House would help secure Moscow's strategic objectives, among them social turmoil in the U.S. and a weakening of the American president's negotiating position. Russia's 3 spy agencies were ordered to find practical ways to support Trump in a decree appearing to bear Putin's signature. By this point, Trump was the frontrunner in the Republican Party's nomination race. A report prepared by Putin's expert department recommended Moscow use all possible force to ensure Trump victory. Western intelligence agencies are understood to have been aware of the documents for some months and to have carefully examined them. The papers, seen by The Guardian, seem to represent a serious and highly unusual leak from within the Kremlin. So they confirmed it with some anonymous sources within either the British government, and its relation to, Christopher Steele and the likes of those, and our own government, and perhaps other intelligence groups that we have connection with, the Israelis, the Germans, the French, right? The Guardian has shown the documents to independent experts who say they appear to be genuine. Incidental details come across as accurate. The overall tone and thrust is said to be consistent with Kremlin security thinking. The report, number 3204VD, which is, any report about Trump should include the letters VD, is classified as secret. It says Trump is the most promising candidate from the Kremlin's point of view. The word in Russian is perspektivny. Perspektivny. From our perspektivny. There is a brief psychological assessment of Trump, who was described as impulsive, mentally unstable, and unbalanced individual who suffers from inferiority complex. Perfectsky. There's also apparent confirmation that the Kremlin possesses compromat, or potentially compromising material on the future president collected. The document says from Trump's earlier, quote, non-official visits to Russian Federation territory, if you know what I'm saying. Who the fuck barges in on 15-year-olds while they're changing in Russia and doesn't expect someone to be filming it? The paper refers, or what, you think we didn't know you pissed on the bed? What the hell, man? You don't think we stored all the urine to see who it was and DNA typed where everyone was? We have a heat signature, the whole... Have you not watched any Bond films? None. Operation Moose and Squirrel. The paper refers to certain events that happened during Trump's visits to Moscow. Security Council members are invited to find details in the Appendix 5. Paragraph 5, the document states it's unclear what the appendix contains. It's not in the documents that they found. It is acutely necessary to use all possible force to facilitate his election to the post of U.S. president. Oh, I don't know why this lady is... Reduce your back pain. Thank you, lady. I thought this was going to be part of the compromise. This is Trump trying to... He's never been able to make this position in his life. This would help bring about Russia's favorite theoretical political scenario. A Trump win will definitely lead to the destabilization of the U.S. socio-political system and see hidden discontent burst into the open, it predicts. By the way, true. Exactly what happened. There's no doubt the meeting took place in January 2016 and that it was convened inside the Kremlin. An official photo of the occasion shows Putin at the head of the table, seated beneath a Russian Federation flag and a two-headed golden eagle. The document seen by The Guardian suggests Security Council's real covert purpose was to discuss the confidential proposals drawn up by the President's Analytical Service in response to U.S. sanctions against Moscow. Vladimir Simonenko, the senior official in charge of the Kremlin's expert department. They have an expert department, a department of experts. That sounds like a good idea. Just saying. It's probably over here we call that the deep state, I guess, right? What do you do? I'm an expert on agriculture. I've been working in here for 20 years. Yeah, deep state. I don't trust you. What are you talking about? Well, anybody who dedicates their life to one particular topic and keeps abreast of all aspects of it and I don't trust... Why would we trust you? Somebody put a bag over his head. The papers indicate that on January 14, 2016, Simonenko circulated a 3-page executive summary of his team's conclusions and recommendations. In a signed order 2 days later, Putin instructed the then-chiefs of his Foreign Policy Directorate, Alexander Manjoshin, to convene a closed briefing of the National Security Council. Its purpose was to further study the document, the order says. They were given a deadline of 5 days to make arrangements. Yeah, here it is. Various measures are cited that the Kremlin might adopt in response to what it sees as hostile acts from Washington. The paper lays out several American weaknesses. These include a deepening political gulf between left and right, the U.S.'s media information space, and an anti-establishment mood under President Barack Obama. The paper does not mention Hillary Clinton. After the meeting, according to a separate leaked document, Putin issued a decree setting up a new and secret interdepartmental commission. Its urgent task was to realize the goals set out in the special part of document number 3204 STD. Members of the new working body were stated to include Shoigu, Fredkov, and Bornikov. Shoigu was named commission chair. The decree ukaz in Russian, ukaz, said the group would take practical steps. I don't know who that guy is. They have his picture in here for some reason. I think is one of those, you know, when AI takes all the features of the worst person you'd want to meet at a dinner party and they synthesize what, based on polling of, we polled 7,000 Americans. And they told us the worst features of a person that they could run into at a dinner party, and AI created this photo. They're not smoothing Putin out at all. So, anyways, the papers appear to set a roadmap for what actually happened in 2016, and on and on and on. It's really fascinating. So, a lot of what they're talking about, we've watched carried out on the farthest spectrums of the political dialogue crowd and you know, in hard ways, in terms of like TYT fomenting violence against cops, and these guys acting like everybody on the left wants to shoot a cop, and you know, basically sniping at each other like lunatics when the rest from Moonbase asshole, and then to the softer versions of it where you have Glenn Greenwald going on Tucker Carlson, and like, I don't know, Professor Richard Wolff going on Thom Hartmann. It just kind of creates this kind of like it sets up the sniping that you see later, right? When the rest of us are like, there's a solution that might, you know, you might call it left or right, but there's actually a solution here that is neither and actually works. We could work on that if we want. No, we're just going to argue and call each other names? Okay, so they've been fomenting that for a while, right? Can you send me a Sparks Force t-shirt design? Absolutely. Send it to the bookhal at iCloud account, which is on my website. Thanks, that's great. Fifth hard lockdown. Sorry about that, Peter. God damn. Okay, so anyways, Newsmax is basically a one-stop shop for carrying out the division policies on the right side of the argument to the electorate, and drumming up this idea that not only are your political opponents, you know, have a different philosophy than you do, but they are violent extremists, and the only answer is to some degree violent extremism on your part.
The Biden administration is all in on Iran again.
Deal with the devil. All in on Iran. Biden administration desperate for new Iran deal. Desperate for new Iran deal. See?
Again, a new nuclear deal. They're willing to give away 3 years of tremendous progress to do it.
What progress? What progress? I don't know. Well, maybe he's going to tell us. Rob, you wouldn't say 3 years of tremendous progress without showing us some progress. And obviously, the progress you're talking about is Iran getting back to the point where they're going to start enriching uranium again.
The State Department informed Congress late Tuesday that it would waive sanctions on Iran's illicit oil trade so the country can access frozen funds from South Korea and Japan. And the money is rolling in.
Yeah. Right now, the Iranian people use, I guess they have their own national currency, but everybody uses tomans, which is another currency, to pay for most stuff, and they have crippling inflation there right now, where people are using what's effectively like half of their take-home pay for basic necessities. You know, and which their rent is about 2/3 of their take-home pay at this point. So economically, the people of Iran are being crushed in this circumstance. And it's sort of the same thing in Cuba about like them not allowing medicine and food to get in because of the sanctions. It's really bad for the actual humans there. Now, I'm not taking the blame away from the Iranian government for this kind of stuff, because they could clean up a bunch of this stuff fairly easily. There's nothing keeping them from being, you know, rational players on the world stage, other than this kind of like fire and brimstone religious lunacy that they run from the top of their country. That does not apply, by the way, to the vast majority of the people there. You know, the British used to ski in Iran all the time. Like it was not that weird to vacation there. This has very little to do with even religious stuff. This is a faux religion, you know, because the Khamenei is arguably the Hank Kuhneman of his own country, and what they're protecting is what, you know, the limited oil rights. Well, now oil has less worth in the world, and now they have nothing else to give because they built their entire economy on it under the regimes over the last 40 years.
There's no reason for the White House to be desperate to re-enter a deal with it.
Well, except unless you don't want the Iranian people to die unnecessarily. That would be a reason. I mean, it's not a reason that Rob Shit cares about. But
Iran, the economic situation in that country is dire. The IMF reports Iran's gross official reserves has dropped from $122 billion in 2018 to just $4 billion today.
Wait a minute. I thought we gave them all that money, and that's how they pay for terrorism all over the world. I guess terrorism turned out to be more expensive than they thought.
They're going broke. A miserable, corrupt regime which hates the West, wants to destroy us, wants to destroy Israel, a regime that spends its...
Yeah, and one of the ways that you upend that regime is that you start negotiating in overt ways so that the people can see this and they start crying out for more freedom and more available stuff, as opposed to covertly just shutting everything down and making the country look like a failure and hoping that their people take to the streets and murder a bunch of people.
Its treasure on terror rather than its own people is nearly broke. And for some reason, we are bailing them out.
Well, no. I mean, they're broke and it's affecting the people. We're not bailing out the terrorists.
Axios today reports that on top of the sanctions...
has agreed to lift almost all U.S. sanctions on Iran to secure a mutual... Yeah, if they agree to return to the nuclear deal, which would extend it, by the way, to its full 10 years beyond it. The new one would extend the deal that existed before it was paused out into the future.
Sanctions already lifted. The Biden administration has agreed to lift almost all U.S. sanctions on Iran to secure a mutual return to the 2015 nuclear deal.
Almost all? Which ones aren't allowed?
Which, of course, was a disaster.
Why was it a disaster? How was it? Rob, you have to tell us how it was a disaster.
You're curious why the administration...
Yes, I am curious why.
Administration simply says sanctions haven't improved Iran's behavior. Yeah. And removing them won't improve Iran's behavior either. Nothing will change the behavior of Iran, but giving them money simply stabilizes this horrible regime. A regime...
So that we're trying to destabilize the regime. Okay, so Newsmax is... they are coming down the side of regime change in Iran. If you can't destabilize it, then we have to go to war there. This is the 7 countries war that, the Project for a New American Century was pushing back in the 90s. Newsmax is, according to Rob Schitt, all in on this.
Regime that Iranians inside and outside of the country are desperate to remove. From the State Department yesterday.
We are prepared to continue engaging in the context of these indirect negotiations with Iran, but we've made no secret of the fact that we are considering the implications of Iran's nuclear advances for a potential return to the JCPOA.
So essentially, there's no deadline, there's not much pressure, and there probably won't be any sanctions.
So that's how, there's no deadline for a deal with the devil. Wouldn't there be a deadline for if you make a deal with the devil? I mean, what kind of deadlines does he operate on? Obviously, you have to do it before you die, because it's what good is a soul that's been sitting on the kitchen counter for a couple of weeks?
So please just make some kind of a deal that we can spin as successful foreign policy here in this country. A lot of this is simply politics. Iran knows it has our number so good on this. It can feel
our number so good.
The weakness of Anthony Blinken and the desperation of a White House that is desperate for a foreign policy win.
Why? We just had a major trade win with Europe. We've got a bunch of foreign policy wins going around. Why is that one? I mean, obviously, there is that whole thing of not wanting them to have a covert nuclear program so that they don't blow up Israel, which is 100% the reason why we're dealing with this. But
last night, charges were brought against 4 Iranians and 1 American for a role in a plot to kidnap an American journalist. Masih Alinejad is a U.S. citizen living in Brooklyn. She reports on the human rights atrocities perpetuated by the Iranian government. So obviously the regime wants this woman dead. The regime was working on a way to do that by kidnapping her. Listen to her describe the situation.
I just heard from FBI 8 months ago. They came to my house and they said, the government in Iran trying to kidnap you. They showed me all the photos that the intelligence...
Wait a minute. It's the FBI, though. I mean, shouldn't we be... I mean, Newsmax was just saying last week, we have to defund the FBI. You can't trust the FBI. If the FBI comes and tells you that Iran is trying to kill you, I mean, arguably, according to Newsmax and Rob Shit tonight, you should probably go straight to Iran. I would, right?
Intelligence service actually sent someone here to take photos of my private life. And then I was like, wow, are they that close to me? I knew that this is the nature of the Islamic Republic.
It doesn't seem like a country that's really that worried about the United States. Evidently.
By the way, Rob Shit has never complained about Putin the same way, and Putin has killed people, literally ordered their murders in parks in Berlin and in England, even though they failed.
The plan was to lure that young woman to a third country and then snatch her up there. You'd think perhaps this would be a deal breaker. Not anymore. Here's the White House.
We still see it in U.S. interest and in our national interest to engage in ongoing discussions so that we can have greater visibility into Iran's path to acquiring a nuclear weapon. So we will continue to pursue those talks, pursue the diplomatic path forward, which we think is in our interests and continues to be constructive.
It cannot be overstated how much our enemies love this White House.
Does anybody remember Rob Shit ever complaining about Trump glad-handing with Kim Jong-un during that time? And the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, that asshole has murdered and continues to murder? You gotta have a good relationship with these folks. You gotta, I mean, you have to. And they achieved an intercontinental ballistic missile test. I happen to think most of their technology is shit, and the earthquake that they allegedly had under one of their bases was actually a huge fail that blew up one of their own sites. But that said, in theory, they were going to be able to reach the west coast of the United States and or Alaska with a missile launch. But did that ever stop Rob? Did Rob Shit ever go, why is Trump shaking hands with that guy? Why is that guy? Yeah.
It cannot be overstated.
Well, you are. You're Rob. You're overstating it.
The White House's plan is to enrich an evil regime that devastated a once beautiful and prosperous nation.
But what about? But enough about North Korea.
They think this will prevent that regime from getting a nuclear weapon. Pay them to play nice. That was always the Obama plan. We'll check this.
It worked.
Out.
Okay.
Iran's president now insists his nation can enrich uranium to 90% purity, weapons grade, if needed. That means.
Yeah, dickhead. Because Trump dropped the nuclear deal and they said we're going back to doing this. Can and will are two totally different things. But they weren't this close when Trump took office. We had the deal in place so they wouldn't keep doing this shit. Trump got out of the nuclear deal and they went, well, fuck it. Let's go back to doing what we're doing. And by the way, weapons grade if needed, which is a threat. But the uranium they're enriching is for power sources because they're running out of oil like everybody else in the Middle East. This is because of Trump. They didn't just now, discover the way to do it when on January 20th.
That means Iran can now have a nuke. And still Iran.
Yeah. That's why we're trying to get into a deal with them and arrange a situation where their inspectors can go in so that they can't get one, so they can't make one.
Claims they never had nuclear ambitions, by the way. Sure. Our government somehow trusts that an evil regime, which wants our entire country and Israel to be destroyed, is telling the truth. These are the same people who believe...
No. No, if we trusted them, we wouldn't insist that the IAEA or U.S. inspectors would have a chance to go look. If we trusted them, we wouldn't have multiple satellites over their country at all times. We don't trust them. That's not the same thing.
Who believe every migrant coming across the southern border is actually seeking asylum.
Yeah, most of them are Iranians, obviously. Most of them are carrying a dirty bomb on their back, covered in anthrax.
They think if we just pour money into Iran, the regime will just happily throw away all of that nuclear progress, which they killed themselves to get. You know how hard it is to figure out nuclear weapons?
I don't know. Talk to Trump. He knows Kim Jong-un personally, and he's managed to do it.
It ain't something that's easy.
It ain't something that's easy. How to Make a Nuke by Rob Schitt.
especially when you're Iran. The last
Especially when you're Iran? Algebra was invented in the Middle East. What the fuck are you talking about?
time we did this, Israel discovered that Iran was cheating on the deal. Big shocker. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went on national television in Israel and announced, quote, even after the 2015 nuclear deal was made, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear know-how for use at a later date.
Preserve and expand. You mean they didn't throw everything out? That wasn't on their nuclear ambitions for actual reactors, by the way. And then the reactors, instead of being built by the Russians that could actually make weapons-grade plutonium or uranium, enrich uranium to a weapons-grade level, instead of having the Russians making those plants, the French were eventually going to make them. And that was a trusted source for us because they could put guarantees in place in the technology that was in those reactors that would keep that from happening. But we have to understand, look who I'm talking to, Mr. SATs.
Of course. Get all your money back and then figure it out later. If you were Iran, wouldn't you do the same thing?
No, I wouldn't. I would want nuclear reactors for power reasons.
Can anybody think a regime that kills its own people and wants to destroy entire nations and supports terrorism will just give up on creating a nuclear weapon when they're right there?
I don't know. Why did Trump go and eat with Kim Jong-un and shake hands with him and write love letters? You tell us right there, Rob Schitt.
They got it done now. Yeah, they're just going to throw it away. I trust them, said Anthony Blinken and John Kerry.
And no, they didn't. They never said that.
Well, our current White House clearly believes that they can change.
Rob, why are you... do you have the biggest studio there and you're just like proving you can walk around on it?
Romantic globalists.
We paid for this giant wall. Use the fucking thing.
John Kerry and Anthony Blinken. People have entirely too...
Biden and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad deal. It's a kid's book reference, right?
much faith in humanity, not nearly enough intellect.
Let's look at the fiber. So Biden looking at Obama for his cues, pile of money, obviously, which he's going to give to Iran or make off of Iran. It doesn't quite matter. We're going to say the same. Also, did we reverse? Yeah, the image of Obama is reversed so that his flag's on the other side. Right.
Human doormats, essentially, is what they are. The last White House was skeptical of evil regimes, which is...
Skeptical? Sorry, Rob Schitt. What? Hold on. One moment, if I may. I'm going to go here. Let's see. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, they were skeptical. Totally skeptical. Skeptical.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
He is a sick puppy. The cruel dictatorship in North Korea.
Thank you. Great personality and very smart.
We fell in love, and we have a very good relationship with Chairman Kim.
President Trump's language toward North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has shifted drastically since...
You think? He was skeptical. It wasn't that he was just insulting him and then they became buddies like business partners. He was skeptical, right, Rob Schitt?
A little more common sense. The play for them was bankrupt this regime out of power. Today is the anniversary of Obama's original Iran deal. Can you believe that?
Yes, I can. Dates happen in order.
Here he is back in 2015, 6 years ago, celebrating the achievement of a really bad deal.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. As Iran takes steps to implement this deal, it will receive relief from the sanctions that we put in place because of Iran's nuclear program.
And then less
That's his response.
than a year after that big moment from the Hill, Obama, Iran not following spirit of the deal. Shocking.
Yeah, that's why we have the ability to snap back sanctions if they don't, and there was constant negotiation. You have to, I mean, START treaty, anyone?
Here's the president that ripped the deal apart.
The nuclear deal threw Iran's dictatorship a political and economic lifeline, providing urgently needed relief from the intense domestic.
Holy shit. This is the one where, is this Gabrush, the United States?
Pressure the sanctions had created. We got weak inspections in exchange for no more than a purely short-term and temporary delay in Iran's path to nuclear weapons.
He would rip it up and follow.
You didn't play the rest of it? Hold on. Your Gabrush, a United States.
The truth is, there really aren't very many good options on Iran. There probably is no good options on Iran. The people.
So, what are you suggesting then? No deal, just let them starve. The best thing really is to just see how many, Iranians you can just have die there. Maybe eventually they'll just rise up and murder their leaders, and then we can, send in peacekeepers?
People of the country are stuck in the middle of all of this. Don't judge the people for what the regime does, by the way.
I don't.
Removing sanctions will...
You do, however, because in all honesty, they're expecting... you're expecting them to just, a certain number of them to just die.
Help the people a bit. That is fair. It will. But it's at a tremendous cost to the future of the country, to the future of the world, to the future of that region. The only thing that would truly improve the quality of life in Iran and reduce terror in the Middle East
is if we invaded.
Is a new system of government there. But again, this has...
Oh, regime change. What I say.
...to be done organically. We can't do it. We're not doing that anymore. More money.
Yeah, we did it before. We're not doing it now. I mean...
though, for this regime, just means richer mullahs and more state-sponsored terrorism. And scraps for the people of the country. It's a high cost.
Hey, I'm Rob.
I didn't even finish the rest of it.
Thanks for watching.
Is everybody there named Rob? Is that how this works? Except for Greg, I suppose?